So, does anybody here actually listen to podcasts? Anybody? Yeah?
I did say I listened to them,
I
but not by
listened
my
to
choice.
American Girl too, AG too.
Cool.
Those American Girl people with their American Girl dolls.
I did not know that was a thing. I love American Girl dolls.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, podcasting is a pretty cool thing. But what is it? So, I define it, and I would say most people define it, as an audio show with one or more hosts about a specific topic that people can listen to at any time. So that means someone records the show, and then you can listen to the show whenever you want. So if you are going for a run, if you don't listen to it while you're swimming unless you have a speaker. So you can listen to it when you're working out. You can listen to it when you're going grocery shopping. You can listen to it before going to bed. Podcasts are something that you can listen to whenever you want. It's pretty cool, actually. You wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're like, man, I can't fall back asleep. You can put a podcast on. So podcasts are pretty cool. You're probably wondering how I know about podcasting. Well, I have a podcast. That's me with my podcast co-host and best friend. His name is Kyle, and our podcast is called the Accessible Stall Podcast. So that's the accessible stall, like the stall that's the big one in the bathroom. It's kind of a silly name, and if you notice, that's the two of us sitting in a stall in the bathroom. I'm on the toilet in that picture. I'm not actually going to the bathroom. Don't worry. We actually record with each other. Anyway, so I thought that I would let you listen to just a little bit of a recent podcast that I have done with Kyle. You'll hear we have introduction music. You'll hear that we introduce what we're going to be talking about. You'll hear a little bit of conversation. I'm not going to play it for too long. I'm just going to give you a little taste of what it's like, okay? And you're listening to another episode of The Accessible Stall.
What are we going to talk about today, Emily?
We are going to talk about exposure to other disabled people.
What? Cool.
We come from very different experiences with this, which I know we've talked about many times before. But specifically, I want to focus on the positives and negatives of growing up surrounded by other disabled people, both like you and unlike you in terms of their disabilities. And then also talk about how growing up versus being an adult with a disability and being surrounded by disabled people is an experience unto itself.
That is a wonderful you know what, that's one of these things that it's cool that we're talking about it now, but it's weird that we're 50 some odd episodes in and just now we're covering that. Because that is a perfect accessible stall topic, because we come from exactly the opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to that sort of thing.
You got a little catchy music, gets everybody dancing. Yeah, exactly. So I said who I am and what I'm going to be talking about, and that's one of the most important things you can do. So I've been doing this for a while now. This is episode number 54. I've been podcasting since 2016. So it's been a while, huh? Yeah, it's been a while. And I really love it. It's a lot of fun. It's a really fun way to get your message across. Yeah. But since a lot of you said that you're not familiar with podcasts, how do you listen to podcasts? We talked about, we made jokes about headphones in the water and things like that, but how do you listen to them? Yes.
You can listen to them on YouTube.
On YouTube, that's right.
Perfect.
Where else can you listen to a podcast? On the radio. On the internet, absolutely. On your phone, on TV. Yeah, so podcasts are all over the place. And you'll see here I have a picture of a computer, because that's one of the most common places that people listen to podcasts. You can go to a website and you can pull up a podcast and play it on your computer while you're doing other things. You can listen to it in the background too, so that's a lot of fun, right?
Yeah, iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio, there you go. See, there's so many ways you can listen to podcasts. And there's also, you'll see, I have a bunch of apps, photos of apps up here. These are iPhone apps, so they may not look super familiar. These are just some of the hundreds of apps that you can use for free to listen to a podcast. All you have to do, you go to the App Store or you go to the Google Play Store if you have a smartphone, and you download a program that you can use to listen to podcasts. Your phone can also come with that too. You may have it on your phone already. Yeah, there you go. So if you go there, you can type in podcasts that you're interested in. Once you download the app to listen to the podcast, you can pick a topic. So if you want to listen to something about disability, you can type in disability in your podcast app. Or you can type disability podcast on Google and see what comes up. Or what if you're passionate about sports? You can look up sports podcasts. So there are so many different ways that you can listen to podcasts. And you'll see a bunch of names of apps up here. You don't need to use all of these. You actually don't need to use any of these if you don't want to. They're just some examples of the many different ways that you can listen to podcasts, because podcasts have become so popular. I don't think Netflix has podcasts. I think Netflix has videos.
Yep.
Right? So you can also listen to them on the radio. A lot of podcasts are broadcast on the radio for free. All podcasts are free, but you obviously have the cost of the phone or the computer if you're going to listen to it that way. But you can also listen to them on the radio. You can also listen to them by perhaps putting them on a music player. iTunes, yes. iTunes is one of the key places to find podcasts. So now we're going to move on. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can use podcasting as an advocacy tool. So this is a really important conversation for us to have. I want you to think about how you can spread your message using a podcast or any form of media. So if you write something, if you create a video, I had a session earlier about videos, and so that's another way that you can spread your message when it comes to advocacy. But what can you do to use a podcast as an advocacy tool? Yes.
You could be honest with the people that you're talking to on YouTube or any source and say, look, I have a disability, but I like this interest.
Absolutely.
And then the whole community of whatever group you're in will say, okay, whatever, that's cool, and then they'll be fine.
We hope that's what they say, right?
Yeah.
How else? Think about a podcast as a form of speaking up for yourself. We're all self-advocates in this room. So if you were to use a podcast and speak up for yourself, how would you use it to advocate?
Is you have to put your Wi-Fi on to put the internet.
Can you tell me more about what you're saying?
Internet, you need to put your internet on their phone.
Right. Well, you have to have the internet in order to create the podcast. Right. And so how can you advocate to people? How can you tell people what it is that you want them to know about you? Yeah. That's right. So you can send the message to your policymakers about what's important to you in terms of disability issues, right? But you don't only have to use podcasting as an advocacy tool. So what other topics can you podcast about? I have a bunch of examples up here. I have a lot of examples up here. I'll go over what it says. I'll read them to you. But I guarantee you that you can think of more than the ones that I've said on here, okay? So I challenge you to come up with other topics. So you can talk about politics or sports, food, television shows. You can tell a story. You can have a comedy podcast. I know we have an entire group of jokesters in here. Fashion. Anybody interested in clothing? I don't know if we have the clothing crowd here. Yeah, there you go. Travel. You can talk about music, movies. You can interview interesting people. Yeah, sports. You can talk about books. You can talk about art. You can talk about health. You can talk about the news, video games. Yeah, there we go. All of this is to remind you, you don't necessarily have to talk just about disability. Part of being a self-advocate is showing people that we have a lot of different interests. So if you're interested in horses, then hey, talk about horses. Now I want to know, how do you record a podcast? And you're probably like, wow, we're getting really technical right now. I have no idea how we record a podcast. I'm going to tell you. And I know that there are a lot of words up here. I know. We're going to go over it. Okay. So one way that you can record a podcast is to use your computer or to use your phone to record the audio. You can do it very simply. There are free computer programs, and if you don't remember the names now, I'll tell you them later, so it's okay. There's one called Audacity, which is a free computer program that you can use. There's also another one called Zencaster, and I know this is a lot of information, so I promise you can ask me as many questions as you need to, because it was a lot of information for me to learn the first time. There's one called Zencaster, which you can also use for free on the computer. But then, if you have a phone, for the iPhone, you can use an app called Voice Memo that comes with the phone. Or, if you have Android, you can use something called Audio Recorder. So there are lots of ways to do this without having to pay any money. Then, you're going to take what you record. I'll get to you in 1 second. You can take what you record and you can put it on a website. So you can put it on YouTube. We've been talking a lot about YouTube, right? Or there's another website called archive.org where you can also put your sound for free. And again, I know this is a lot of information and I know there's a lot of steps in between. I don't want to get too much into the specifics because also it's late in the afternoon and who wants to get bored with all the specifics, but I'm giving you some of the names of the resources. And then if you have more specific questions, we can talk about them moving forward. And if you want to be fancy, you can also buy professional headphones and a professional microphone. You see that microphone photo up there? That's a pretty fancy professional microphone. So that's something that you can use to record, but you don't need a fancy setup. If you have a phone or a computer, you have all you need. So now you're probably wondering, you've made a podcast, how do you get people to listen to it? So I have a couple of different suggestions here, but I also want to hear some of your ideas. So you can share your podcast on social media, you can email your family and friends about it, or you can make flyers, you can make business cards, you can make little pieces of paper with the name of your podcast on it. There's lots of different ways to spread the word. And a great thing to do is to advocate for yourself and tell people that you have a podcast. I mean, that's what I do. I'm doing it right now, technically, by telling people that I have a podcast right here. So advocating for yourself is the best thing that you can do when it comes to getting your message out. And podcasting is a great way to do that. But now that we've talked a little bit about how, I think it's time that we practice. I believe in making things a very hands-on experience. So using just our phones, and you can team up with people, we're going to practice making a podcast. I know it sounds a little scary, but all it is just having a conversation. So what you're going to do is you're going to ask yourself, what is your podcast topic? Pick a topic that you want to talk about. Then you're going to say, what would you name your podcast? And this can be a fun activity to come up with an idea. You can decide what it is that you want to name it. So for me, I named it The Accessible Stall. Maybe if you have one on horses, for example, you can come up with a fun name around horses or something like that. Then decide what your first episode would be about. And we're not going to make a whole episode here. We're not going to do that. I don't think we have time for that. But what we are going to do, What we are going to do is practice recording a little bit. So we're going to write out some ideas, and then we're going to kind of get together and record a little bit. You can kind of spread out around the room. You can head out into the hall if you want. But I just want this to be a fun learning experience. And it's also kind of an experiment. So we're going to see how it goes. We're going to see how it goes for you. I'm going to come around. We can talk about it. You can ask me questions. And we can also listen maybe to some of what you record if you'd like. But before we do that, I just want to ask, does anybody have any questions for me? Because I know that this is so much information and there's a lot probably that I've left out, but I just don't want to overwhelm you all with information. So if you want to know anything, just ask me. I'm happy to answer. You good? Okay, everybody ready to practice?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, it's going to be fun, guys. Where's your enthusiasm? I know we're getting towards the end of the day after lunch, but I promise you, it'll be fun. Okay, alrighty. So everybody kind of figure out if you want to work on your own or in groups. And the first thing I want you to do is decide on a topic and decide on some things that you would talk about. If it's advocacy, if it's sports, if it's music, if it's movies, whatever it is.